So let's start with, let's say you go to your doctor. Okay, you got a cough. Go to the doctor. Doctor has known you for a little while. Say, all right, you're about a 60-year-old white male professional. You've occasionally had the flu. You need more exercise. You had bronchitis once. No major medical problems. There's a lot of colds that are going around the suburb lately. I think you got a cold. And they say, I can't do anything for a cold. I can't prescribe anything. It's a cold. It'll be gone in a couple weeks. So you go home. And that's, I think, generally speaking, the kind of experience that we tend to have with our physicians. They're doing what we call experiential diagnostics, and I'll talk about that in a minute. How often is your doctor correct? Who thinks their doctor is correct 30% of the time? Show of hands. 41? All right. 30%, really?
Are you going to go?
All right, change your doctor. That's an easy one. Show of hands. 40%. 50%. 60. 70, a lot of 70s. 80, a lot of 80s. 90, 100% of the time, the doctor's in problem. There you go. He likes his doctor. Actually, the studies show about half the time. Your doctor is right about half the time with his or her diagnosis. That's generally the case in all of these kinds of fields, about half the time. And whether you're calling a call center to get your computer fixed, you're going to your doctor, it's about 50% of the time. The question I'm not going to ask you right now is, how often are you right? How often are lawyers right? Because the difference that we're going to be talking about today is the difference between experiential predictions, experiential diagnosis, which is basically, yeah, I've got a lot of experience in this, and here's what I think. My gut tells me this. I've seen a lot of this before, and I think this. That's experiential, and that's kind of what we're used to. Versus data-driven, which is just looking at the numbers. No bias, no preconception. I'm just going to look at the numbers, and I'm going to tell you what the numbers show. So there's no subconscious bias. We don't think we're biased, but of course we're all biased in many ways. The data isn't biased. It's just the data. It's just whatever the data show. So what if your doctor, you went to the doctor, I got a cough, I got a problem, and the doctor looks at you and does all that stuff, and then also says, and also then has the ability to look at your last 250 Facebook posts, and all the photos that you've uploaded, and all the people that you've connected with, all of your friends, and their posts, and their photos, and your blogs, and tweets, and LinkedIn, and Snapchats, and Instagram, all of them. And look at your credit card receipts. What did you buy? Where did you go? What have you done? Where did you drive? Where did you take an Uber? Who were you with when you did? What restaurants did you go to? What did you order when you were there? What grocery stores do you shop at? What do you buy? And then looks at the local and national news and synthesizes every single newspaper, every article, and every piece of information in every one of those newspapers and understands what all of that means. And in the process, they said, well, now the computer says to itself, as computers might, now I see that you bought a plane ticket to Charlotte, North Carolina. You rented a car. I see in your daughter's Facebook that there's a picture of you with her in Charleston, South Carolina, and knows from the news that there was a hurricane there, and extrapolating from that knows that there was flooding, and that flooding means mold, and looking at my medical chart says, wait, you're allergic to mold. I'll bet you that's not a cold. I'll bet you you've got an upper respiratory infection. In fact, there's an 86% chance that based on all of this information, you've got an upper respiratory infection that would respond very well to Augmentin. That's better, isn't it? So a doctor is good. Not your doctor is not good. But some of you have good doctors. What if you had a doctor with access to that kind of information? In fact, if you do have access to that computer program that can take all of that information, synthesize it, infer from the data, select which pieces of information out of these millions of data points are the relevant ones, infer solutions and predictions from that, and be able to say, well, it's an 86% chance that it's this, it's a 12% chance that it's that, it's a 1% chance that, and just objectively say, here's what the data show. And we predict that actually a Z-Pak is better than Augmentin with this particular strain of mold and that particular upper respiratory infection. Your prescription is waiting for you at your local Walgreens, and it knows where you are based on where your phone's GPS is, and says the closest Walgreens is this one, it's waiting for you. You don't really need a doctor for that, do you? You might want a doctor, but do you really need one? If I were a doctor, I'd be really nervous, because this is the sort of thing that artificial intelligence can start to do, that is starting to learn. Because most of the information that I identified is publicly available, or at least available for purchase. Your grocery store receipts, all of the purchases, everything on your credit card. Companies can buy that data. It's going to be available. The technology, there's a lot of different artificial intelligence products. The one that I know best is IBM's Watson. Watson, as you know, is the technology that beat Jeopardy. And what was significant about that was that it was understanding the language and analyzing it based on common language. And that's something that computers couldn't previously do. We had a lot of information, it just wasn't usable. And so now it is. According to the Cleveland Clinic, when you can't process data, you compensate based on experiential, right? We all understand that if the data becomes overwhelming, we just trust our gut, we trust our experience. We always have. Even when we didn't have data, it was based on our experience. And now when we have more data, and it could potentially become overwhelming. What are all the data points that we have potentially available, accessible to us? Less than half of medical diagnoses are fact-based. Wouldn't it be nice if your doctor was working with facts instead of opinion? It's just experiential. And we've always been comfortable with that because that's what we had. That's what we have. But isn't it better to have data as opposed to guessing? Because your doctor's really just guessing based on what he or she has seen most recently.